Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rock and Road to Success. Today we have the one and only JC Rodriguez, the man who was, how do you say the lineman thing? The electric lineman thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Electrical lineman, I guess, or line technician.
So, JC, we were talking this weekend about making memories on the weekends, and you mentioned that this weekend you had the chance to introduce a special food to your daughter. How was that? What kind of food was it? You made me very anxious to know what was that food.
Yeah, so we just got our first cold spell, so I turned the coal stove on. It was pretty cold here over the weekend, or starting on Sunday. So my daughter really hasn't ever had hot chocolate. So growing up, we didn't always have a ton of. We weren't very well off, so sometimes my mom would just make us hot chocolate and toast for lunch or dinner or whatever. So since she's a little bit older now, I made hot chocolate and toast this Sunday. We had that for lunch, and she really loved it. So, and it was the first time I had it in a very long time. So I was just thinking of my childhood, and they were good memories, you know. So I was happy to be able to share that with her. So yeah, that was I don't know what meal you were quite expecting, but it was just something
Dude, that,
simple that
that
we
was very
enjoyed.
wholesome,
Yeah.
really,
So
to get that childhood memory. And food is something that really brings people together. So, and how is her relationship with your mom? How how do you guys get to meet? Do you guys your
yeah,
children and your parents?
yeah, we're very active with both of our sets of parents. They both only live less than 15 minutes away, so they're over there a lot, or we spend a lot of time with them. And yeah, they love both of our kids love their grandparents, so we spend probably once or twice a week at either one. So
Yeah, that's a hell of a privilege, especially in America, because people tend to live so far away from their parents, right?
yeah, yeah, we lived 4 hours away for about 2 years, and then we finally got to come home. That was before we had kids, though. So yeah, my on my wife's side, our daughter was like the first grandchild and great grandchild. So we're really happy that we can be around a lot of our family.
So your wife's grandparents are still here then.
Yep, and her I believe her great grandmother is also.
One of the questions I like to ask is about the obsessions that people used to have when they were kids or when they were younger. And yours was very interesting. You said you were a Lord of the Rings fan and you used to play a lot Lord of the Rings online and were sort of obsessed with Tolkien literature. So, how's your relationship with Lord of the Rings?
It's still going pretty strong. I don't play Lord of the Rings online hardly anymore. I just sat down over the weekend for the first time in a while to play with my wife for a little bit. But yeah, I think I read the trilogy at least 3 times by age of 16. I read through the Silmarillion. My favorite books is The Children of Hurin from Tolkien. Um, and I just hugely latched on to his storytelling, you know, the huge depth of the whole Lord of the Rings universe. You know, there's a lot of fantasy out there, but, you know, he created entire languages, and there's just so much outside of the existing story to find and learn about that I just love. And I think when, so I was cyber schooled growing up, which is a lot different than what most people were, you know. So I think I went to the local public school for like half of a grade in kindergarten. But the rest of my time I spent uh, doing online school. So I was always home, either in a computer class, or I didn't ever have to commute to school, so I had a lot more time there, and I spent as much time as my parents would allow me playing Lord of the Rings online when I was growing up, for sure. Yeah.
Did they let you play a lot?
I played a lot, yes. A lot of it probably they didn't realize I was playing, but yes, I did play a lot.
And man, could you tell us a bit more about how the experience of being cyber schooled is? Because I think this might be more of an American thing, and our friends in other parts of the world might find it a very interesting experience, a different thing to know about. So, how was your experience, like being homeschooled and cyber schooled?
Yeah, so for me, it worked very well. I think there's definitely some instances where it's not good. If you're not very self motivated, or you don't, um, not sure how to put that, because it's hard when you're younger, right? We all learn differently. But for me, I was able to be at home in an environment where I could, do what I needed to do to process the information well. And I think if I had to be at a desk for 8 hours, I think I would have really struggled. So when I was younger, they were all always scheduled classes. So I had a teacher. I had to go to a virtual classroom at a certain time every day. I had assignments. I had reading I had to do. So all of that, it was pretty well structured, the same as school. I just could do it at home. And then when I was a little bit older teenager, I was able to start doing a bunch of my classes as self-paced, so I didn't have like a live teacher, which meant that I could work it so I had like either 2 or 3 days a week that I didn't actually have any live classes. So I was able to like go work at a regular job for those days, or have different things that I could do outside of school, because I didn't have to do school that day, because I saved it all for like 2 days a week. So yeah, that was my experience. Not everything is the same, or every person experiences it the same way, but it worked out really well for me.
Yeah, like you were saying, for self-motivated kids, it might be actually a better experience than regular school. But do you know of anyone who wasn't as self-motivated as you or as interested in learning and had a similar experience?
So I hate to pick him, but my little brother, he could not stand it. So I think my mom finally was like, okay, well, you're just going to go to public school. So I think when he was 14 or 15, he ended up going to the public school the rest of his uh, going to high school. So that it, and I don't know if it wasn't just like, I think a lot of that was he wanted to be around other kids more, and I was happy with how many, like my social circle, but he thought he was kind of missing out. So I think that was a lot of the motivation for that one. But yeah,
So he was more of an extroverted type of child, probably.
yeah, yep,
And back to Tolkien, you also mentioned that you love black licorice and Japanese power metal. And why is it that metalheads usually like these kind of medieval mythology style of literature of, you know, like Tolkien and other similar authors? Why do you think that might be?
I'm not sure. I haven't really. I don't know if I've ever like spent a lot of time with other metalheads to see what they like to read, but I think there's a lot more themes you can explore in metal than there are, regular music. Like, it'd kind of be hard to make a country song about, riding your horse in a battle or something, So, um, I guess they kind of do that, but uh, yeah, I grew to like metal as a young teenager. There's a Christian music festival that we would always go to because my uncle actually produced it. It was one of the largest Christian music festivals in the United States. In the late 2000s, they would get 80 to 100,000 people in a day. So kind of being exposed to, metal at different levels there, and then coming home and listening to different bands. That's how I really got involved into listening to heavy metal. But I don't know, there's certain genres that are completely around metal, like power metal, is very into fantasy and, talking about those subjects back in the day. And so I think that's part of it. I do think metal has a pretty substantial connection to like classical music. And I don't know if that's where some of the connection comes from also. Like generally, I don't know. I guess this isn't a great generalization to make because there's so many metal genres, but metal has more in common to classical music than a lot of other genres do. So I think it's easy for you to hear those similarities in certain bands. And I think classical music, to me, it makes me think of the past, and different old composers or whatever. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. So
I think it has a lot of sense in what you're saying because, like, what we call classical music, things from 200, 300 years ago, they have a lot of these elements, like the medieval themes, the folklore, especially the European style folklore, like the elves and the bards, all those sorts of stuff. And going back into metal, I also think that we tend to have, the guys will hate me for this, but better musicians overall in metal bands than in other styles of music, especially other styles of more popular music. Because I think there's more of a focus on technique, especially because I also play the guitar. Probably not as well as you do because you're more of a metal fan. But I think especially guitarists, they have a lot of focus on techniques and all of those finger tapping techniques and all of those sweeping, and they like that virtuoso thing, if you know what I mean.
oh yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot more creative freedom in metal, obviously, because you can do more with more notes. If you have 32 notes to play with instead of 8, there's a little bit more that you can do in a bar. And I think there's nothing wrong with listening to pop music or whatever. Like I don't have any issue with anybody that listens to it, and there are a lot of incredible musicians that play in those genres, but there's definitely a different level to being able to play at 150, 200 beats per minute. There's just another intensity to it that regular music doesn't have, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no disrespect to the more pop songs or to punk music. It's kind of hard to play so many songs with just three chords, or in popular music also with less beats, less instruments. It's not easy to make a lot of songs and a lot of good songs with less notes in general, less instruments. So it is another type of virtuousness, if
Mm-hmm.
that's, I don't know if that's a word or if I
Yeah.
just made it up.
Yeah. So I think I start listening to Galnerius. That's the Japanese power metal band that I listen to, uh, called Galnerius, and they sing some in English and some in uh, Japanese. But I think what attracts me to them the most is they have this really powerful just control over the emotion in their music. Like I have no idea what he's saying, but it makes me want to cry sometimes. You know, if you ever had, music that you listen to and like all of the composition all lines up, how the singer's singing, it's just super emotional, and I really love, when you start listening to, obviously, music from different countries, they use different scales and different ways that they compose their music. That just, to me, is great to listen to because you get exposed to different ideas. So I've tried to branch out and listen to different music from different countries. I find it pretty interesting.
Yeah, one of these days I was listening to the singer. I'm not sure if you know of him. His name is Dimash, something like that. He's from Kazakhstan, and the guy's incredible. He's like unreal. It's like, you know how they had those Abercrombie guys with the six packs and they said they were like a real life Photoshop? This guy's like the real life autotune.
Oh
It's
yeah.
unbelievable, man. Like
Yeah.
afterwards, I'll send you a link to him singing live, and he's got like this whole orchestra behind him, and he's just singing, and he does these effects with his voice. They're like he's unbelievable, and his range. He goes from very, very deep to very, very high in like a
Mm.
split second. Unbelievable. And like you said, sometimes we can find these amazing artists from places we never imagined, like Kazakhstan or Japan for that matter.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think that's a beautiful thing in music because it's pretty much an universal language. And back to your relationship with music, do you think you started really enjoying music because of your uncle and his influence, because he was involved with production and having these massive events?
I think that was definitely part of it. But we always, like growing up, we always had something on, like music wise. And I think going and seeing those musicians all the time, like really inspired me. I tried to play the violin, I think when I was 13 or 14, and I got some lessons, but it never really stuck with me. I wish I had picked like a little bit easier instrument, and the lessons were like pretty far away. It was like a 40-minute drive for us to go to lessons. So I never stuck with it when I was younger. Um, but yeah, just growing up in a family that we always had something playing, whether it was metal or country or whatever. It was just, there was always music, and that was probably the biggest influence for me to really enjoy it. And I always, like, whenever, and it's still to this day, like I need to be listening to something to focus on what I'm doing. So that's just how I kind of go through life. As I've found, for me, when I'm listening to music, and it doesn't necessarily matter what it is, it just helps me focus and not be distracted with other things. So that's another big part of it.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience because my dad always was listening to music as well. He still does, but when I was growing up, and like you, I can't study or work or do anything, get in a car, anything without music or a podcast or some kind of background noise.
Yeah, absolutely. So have I told you about my name yet? I don't know this. I'm surprised this didn't come up earlier.
You have told that you are, I believe, half Spanish, half Italian, right?
I mean the JC part.
Yeah, the JC. I think Redham told me, but let's get the big reveal then.
So my name is actually Johnny Cash Rodriguez.
Really?
So that I when I was like 10 or 11, I wanted to be called JC instead of Johnny. So that's how I started being called JC. But yeah, my name's actually Johnny Cash. So maybe that's part of the
That,
reason why I love music so much.
dude, that's so fucking cool. So Johnny is not like John, it's really Johnny,
Yeah. Yep.
like in your documents and everything.
Yep.
Dude, this is so cool. Like you were destined to be a musician then.
Yep, yeah, that's for sure. Well, sooner or
So,
later, I had to come around to it.
dude, like I think if you put it on X, they think it's a fake because,
Oh yeah, yeah,
dude,
most
that's
people do.
unreal.
Yep.
And was your dad a big fan of Johnny Cash or your mom?
Yeah, he was a really big fan of Johnny Cash, and my dad's first name was Johnny too. So they were really just looking for like a middle name, and they were. I think they were trying to decide with my grandmother, and my grandmother was like, "What's that? What's that country singer that you love to listen to? Johnny Cash. Just name him Johnny Cash." So that's how I got my name. But yeah, it
Dude,
it
you gotta
as
change your bio now. Johnny Cash is much more. Yeah, dude, you were born with a rock star name.
Yeah, I know.
Dude, this is so cool. I gotta tell everyone about this now.
Yeah, you're gonna change the title of the podcast to "Interviewing Johnny Cash."
Yeah, I got the real life Johnny Cash. He's not alive anymore, is he?
No, no, he passed away 15 years ago. I'm probably horribly. I should know that, but I do not.
Yeah, it's pretty much family. Oh man, that's that's so cool. Now I kind of got lost because I'm so mesmerized with
you,
this revelation that
you you don't have to
I
be
can't do
starstruck
this
over
anymore.
me.
I can't ask you any more questions about other stuff. And how did you end up picking up the guitar since you tried the violin and it was a bit too hard to go to class because it was far away? When did you decide to try the guitar?
Yeah, so it was during COVID, and I we started on these like 1 week on, 1 week off shifts, and our shop at the time. I was a lineman at that point. I worked on high voltage electric lines, and we only had 6 linemen there. So 3 of us were on 1 week, and 3 of us were on the other. So I had these whole weeks where I was home, all throughout the summer. So I had been listening to Omnium Gatherum, and their guitarist's name is Marcus Valhalla, and he's one of the best melodic metal guitarists I listen to. I love him. And I was watching the music video for the song Frontiers, and there's this just super incredible solo. And I was like, man, I really want to do that one day. Like, if I could do that, then I would feel accomplished, uh, you know, as whatever. So I looked on Amazon, I looked on Google for a bunch of guitar reviews. I think I had actually borrowed my buddy's acoustic at first, and then I was like, I really want to play electric, so I ended up buying an electric and teaching myself how to play. It was about 3 years ago now. So yeah, that's how I decided to get into it. It was just listening to the music I was and having enough time to say, okay, well, I think I can commit to this right now. So
So you were self-taught on those weeks off.
yep, yeah, I haven't ever actually had a guitar lesson. I've bought a couple courses, but I don't think I've ever even finished them. So
But you got a bit of the basics from them.
yeah, no, they were good courses. I just um, realized that what I was playing live was relatively simple, and what I wanted to do, down the road was not in those courses. So I kind of found some more YouTube teachers that aligned with what I wanted to do.
And the last time we talked, you did mention that you were thinking of doing some YouTube videos for guitar lessons. How is that project going?
It's not going anywhere at the current moment. I don't know if I will in the near future or not. And it's not anything other than um guitar videos are they're pretty high standard at this point. I mean, there's a lot of really incredible teachers out there, and I just don't know if I can put what I want out, and I just don't have the, when you're starting, it takes hours to record videos, and you have to put lots of stuff together. I think I would be more comfortable like writing a book or, a lesson guide for beginners. That's something that I definitely have thought about, I think. But videos might be another year or two. We'll see.
Yeah, videos are very hard work. A lot of editing, a lot of moving pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were going to start over again, or if you were going to tell someone how to start playing guitar, what would you tell them?
I would say find a group of people you can play live with and play live as soon as possible. That's for me what I think really helped me grow really quickly on the guitar was I started playing at my church in like 6 months after I picked it up. So you find out very quickly what is wrong with your technique. Not necessarily because other people tell you, right? No one really ever came up to me and was like, oh, well, actually, that's not true. There was one service that I completely bombed. But I was the only one playing. But yeah, you just being with musicians that play better than you, that are, supportive, right? Because there are a lot of musicians that are not supportive. So you kind of have to be really careful in that sense. But yeah, going out there and testing your ideas and your abilities really quickly, to me, was the best thing that I started off with and that I would encourage others to do. For me, otherwise, like, I think I spent a lot of time learning either stuff that was way above my skill level, and that was kind of a waste of the time in the beginning. Like, you can't really, it's hard to practice tapping if you've never practiced your rhythm. So, you kind of have to start with the basics and practice them for quite a few months to get where you should be to learn some more advanced stuff. So, yeah, I guess those would be my two main tips: is get your basics down and play live.
Yeah, you get the accountability factor because you don't want to embarrass yourself in front of other people when you're going to play with them. So definitely can help. And like you said, I think there are two types of musicians, the ones that are very open-minded and they want to help the rookies, and the ones that are drama queens and have an ego. So I'm glad that I mostly had experiences with open-minded guys that helped
Mm-hmm.
me when I was first starting, but yeah, you can get some assholes in the
Oh
way.
yeah, absolutely.
And man, if we can go back to your lineman times, I think the populace must know of those stories of getting up in the middle of the night and walking through the snow with the snowmobiles. Dude, tell us some of those stories because they are awesome.
Yeah, so I worked on high voltage power lines for like 6 years, from when I was 20 to when I was 26, and I'm just turning 27 here soon, so it wasn't that long ago. But yeah, so I went to line school in Georgia, which was like a 14-hour drive from my home. Graduated from line school 4 months later, got a job in Maryland for the power company that serves Maryland and DC. I had like 1 million customers. And that was a pretty incredible experience. Like the complexity of the power supply system down there is just insane. Like it's on a whole nother level. And that was a really fun time for me because I love, like, problem solving is like one of my favorite things to do, right? So you would have to go, find an issue with underground power lines are a huge thing down there. Locating them, finding the fault, fixing it when there's damage. That was so much fun. getting called out for outages at night is just, I don't even know how to really explain it, because there's so much adrenaline involved. You're going into a situation that you have no idea about to restore customers' service, and it's not like you're turning their TV back on. This is electricity. Everybody needs it to live at this point. And so you have a lot you're thinking about. Often it's in the middle of the night. I think one of the biggest wrecks I worked on down there, we had this massive oak tree. It was like you couldn't get 3 people around it, and with their arms spread. And it come over and broke like 2 poles and had this huge 3-phase circuit all on the ground, this massive wire. I don't even know. We hardly had enough grips to pull all the wire back up, but we ended up working into the next day. And that was an interesting experience because we didn't have very many people that had been there for very long that night. They couldn't get anybody else in. So I think the most senior guy had been there 10 years. And so we all kind of were working together to figure out how to even do some of the stuff we were doing, because we were very new. And that's not necessarily unusual, because an issue with power companies in general is that they haven't really done a ton of hiring, and it's hard to retain people. So a lot of the crews at power companies nowadays are, not super experienced. They don't have a lot of guys that have been there for 20 years. So anyway, yeah, we ended up getting it all back on at like, I think 10 or 11 the next day. And that was, it's just fun to push yourself to where you're very tired, and but you have a goal, right? So you're looking to get that finished. And that was one experience I never will forget. Then I moved back home to my hometown, and it was like a complete shift, right? So you had a super complex power supply system, and then I went to like the most basic, single phase, hardly, not very much 3-phase. It was all relatively simple. But the challenge there is that everything is extremely inaccessible. So the majority of your time is spent climbing poles instead of, using a bucket truck. And that, I had some struggles with that early on, and working through that with the crew. So down in Maryland, I worked with like 120 other guys. And when I came back to Pennsylvania, I was on a crew with 5 other guys. So they, become your brothers because you spend so much time with them. It's like you spend more time with them sometimes than your own family. So let me see. I've done, crazy things. Down in Maryland, I did two really cool things that I haven't done up here. I climbed an 85-foot pole and a 200-foot tower. I think I posted a picture of when I climbed that 200-foot tower the other day. That was a lot of fun. That was definitely one of the highlights of my life. I would have loved to get into more transmission work, but I wanted to have a family, and it's a lot of traveling. But yeah, so back up here, we had last year this massive snowstorm. It was like 2 feet, maybe 2.5 feet, like overnight. And I was on call, right? And so I woke up, it was like midnight, I think, and I looked at my phone, and there was like, so we only have 20,000 customers or so. And I looked at my phone, and there was like 10,000 out. And I was like, oh, that's bad. So I laid down, and I went back to sleep for an hour. I woke up, and there was like 19,000. I was like, oh, that's really bad. I probably should call someone. But we ended up working for like 8 days. to get them all restored. But that was that's I think the biggest actual event in the history of the company, outage wise. So, yeah, I don't know if you're familiar at all with climbing poles, but the process is basically now, like, they used to never use safety belts. They would just climb with, like, holding the pole, and you strap these steel hooks to your feet and you stab them into the pole and you climb up it. Now they have belts that go around the pole that, like, won't let you fall more than a few feet. But yeah, so I got really good at that over the last 4 years, and it's just a different level of physicality, I guess. Like, when you climb a pole, it's not even like climbing a ladder, right? You use muscles that you have no idea that you ever even had. Maybe I'll have to send you a video sometime of me climbing a pole, but it's a very unique experience, and being able to push yourself mentally, because there is kind of a mental hurdle. You're up 30, 40, 50 feet, and all you have is a rope around this pole and these tiny hooks. I mean, they're like, that's as much as they go in. It's like a quarter of an inch to a half an inch into the pole when you're climbing it. So there's all these mental things that you have to get over to just get up and do your work.
Is that safe at all?
Oh yeah, it's very safe. I can't say that I maybe fallen like once, but your belt catches you if you do. So it's a lot safer than it ever used to be. Like, back in the early 1900s, line work was the most dangerous job out there. Half of all linemen would die in a year. But now, I mean, we have so many things to keep us safe, and processes, and protections like rubber gloves, tagging things out, different safety schemes with how the breakers operate, which you're like, the breaker in your house, that trips when there's an issue. It's the same idea, but with 7,000 volts. So
I'm glad their lives weren't in vain.
Yeah, so it's definitely way safer than it ever used to be. Not that there isn't an element of danger there, absolutely. It is a dangerous job, but I think you have to be kind of very trusting of the people that you work with. And because I was in such a tight-knit group, we very much trusted each other, and that helps a lot with that worry.
And how do you deal with living with so much adrenaline, especially at your old job? Because as you told me before, it was a bit more dangerous and you were climbing those 200 feet poles. How do you deal with being literally on the top of the world? And I guess you might have a bit of an endorphin and a bit of a high by getting up there and feeling good about yourself for this physical exercise. But how does it feel to be pretty much all the time with this adrenaline rush through your veins?
Yeah, I think some of it does wear off at a point, but there's a lot of stress conditioning that goes on. Like, you have to, your body has to be able to accept a huge amount of stress, right? So you get used to it depending on how well or how much you want to do it, right? So there's lots of people that can't. There's lots of linemen that work for a couple years and then realize, like, it's not for them, and not for anything other than the late hours or the overnight hours, or they want to, which there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a life outside of work, obviously, but you have to have a very committed mindset, I think, to be able to push your body to that level. And I don't want, like, I'm not military, I'm not saying, that I'm that level, but there's a certain kind of comparison that you can think about, like how if you think about like a Navy SEAL or someone who does really intense, long, either trainings or when, they have to go out, they've trained their body to accept a certain level of stress tolerance and be able to deal with it because they know they have something to, a mission or whatever. So you look at those people and you have to think, like, what actually physically separates us from them? Like, is my body physically different? Do they have something else other than me? And so I personally believe that we are capable of way more than what our mind tells us we're capable of. So I'm sure I will get, like, rated by the health nuts, but you can endure being awake for 36, 40 hours. I've done it. Is it healthy for you? Probably not, but it is possible to do. But it entirely depends on your mindset, right? If you aren't mentally able to continue to have that goal that you're doing, whether it's, restoring power lines or whatever, you're going to not be able to do that thing. And I think I learned that from line school. Actually, my instructor was probably one of the most difficult instructors at the school. And he would constantly tell us, like, the pole is the same at the bottom as it is at the top. It's just what your mind is telling you. That now that you're 40 feet in the air, that there's danger there. So we can, our minds are super powerful. We can convince ourselves that we want to do something. We can convince ourselves that we don't want to do it. And learning how to understand what your body is telling you and push it farther than it thinks it can go or you can go is just it's a mental thing, and it's hard to explain to if you've never, like, pushed yourself that far, or it's kind of hard to explain, I guess. But part of it is stress conditioning, part of it is your mindset, and I don't think very many people get to experience anything quite like it. Most people that work a regular job, or they're not going to have to wake up in the middle of the night until they have kids. or you know what I mean? Like, most of the time we would never even think of being put in a situation like that. So when we look at the people that do, it's like, how in the world could they ever stay awake for 24 hours doing stuff like that? So
Because they have to.
Yeah, because they have to. Yep, that's exactly it.
Dude, I love that quote from your teacher that the pole is the same at the ground and at the top. I think it's very powerful, and you're right. There are many things that we could do physically, but our mind doesn't let us. And of course, in a much less high stakes level, but I think going to the gym is a thing that you start pushing your mind as well, because sometimes your body could take another rep or could take a bit more weight, or even a workout when you're not feeling like it, but your mind doesn't let you. And I think you have this theme in your life that you even mentioned, that you like to get over as many fears as you possibly can, except for spiders. That is one you're not willing to get over.
No, I hate spiders. No, I will never. Like, you watch some videos of people, like, having giant ones crawl all over them. My literal worst nightmare. So, but anything else, I'll probably work on.
Yeah, I have something similar with snakes. I also hate snakes. Dude, and going back to this mental conditioning and tolerance to stress, do you know of someone that failed during their mission? Like someone that was working with you? Did someone ever halfway through the mission, the guy couldn't take it anymore and had to go away or something like that?
We had one apprentice that got hired, and he like really had no desire to work. Um, and he wanted like I, I don't know that there were some things around that also, but yeah, he just really struggled with having a good attitude the entire time. Like he always wanted to be off doing something else. I don't know as if there was any times where he like maybe there was once that he left, and but other than that, like we were very, especially at our shop, we were very adamant. Like if you were going to work here, you have to be a part of the team because we all hold each other up. It wasn't a I'm going to turn an outage down because other guys turn it down. It was when your phone rang, you came in, and because everybody else did, and they have for years. And I don't think I think I maybe missed one call in my entire 4.5 years or whatever as a lineman. And which to me, being committed to something, even when it sucks, is what was a huge thing I learned, because when you're working in that kind of group, they're looking for your commitment. And it doesn't really matter necessarily if you mess up at your job or you mess up at what you're doing. As long as you're there and you're saying, okay, yes, I want to work and I want to learn, and you show up, even when it's no fun or you're missing out on something, there are tons of times. I can't count how many times I was either at a birthday party or at, an event, and my phone rang and I had to go. So that was a huge struggle, not necessarily for me because I loved what I was doing, and I don't know if it was a mental block or a commitment, to say, okay, well, this is my job and this is where it has to be over these other things. But it was a struggle with my family, absolutely, because they didn't. It was hard for them to rationalize me leaving to go to work, and that isn't something that's easy to convey in any way, and so, but that was part of the reason why I finally decided to become an electrical engineer, was to be able to spend more time with my family. But yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Dude, so yeah, of course it does, man. So you wanted to have a more balanced life, about like more of a work-life balance, so you didn't have to be on call all the time and have crazy hours. It's totally understandable. And going back a bit to what you were talking about, it seems like there was a sense of camaraderie and perhaps a sense of purpose that was very strong within the group. And I was going to ask you about the leadership. Do you think there was also this strong sense of leadership from the bosses in those groups? How was that sense of leadership, and or do you think it was more a matter of the camaraderie within the group? What were the most important aspects you think to make those teams work so well?
yeah, absolutely. Leadership was a huge one. And I've been through a leadership course, but in line work in general, there's always this kind of leadership aspect because you have to teach the next person. So I had to, when we had people move up, I had to teach the next apprentice, right? That was my job, and I was an apprentice. But you learn that because and with us it was a super small group, so a lot of times you were just working with another guy. So it was you and one other guy going out to restore an outage, whether it was one span or whether it was 6 or 8. You had to figure out how to do it. So you had to be able to make those decisions if with that other guy. So whoever was right above you, whether it was a journeyman or whether it was your lead man, you had to work well with them. You had to be their friend, not necessarily all the time, but when you work with someone for 10, 15, 20, 30 hours straight, there is that camaraderie there for absolutely. You have to like who you're working with, or it's got to be a completely miserable experience and having fun, But from a leadership aspect, absolutely. That it's very, like I said, dangerous work. So you have to trust the people that you're working with, the people that are making the decisions above you. You have to trust that they're, identifying the right piece of equipment, you're in the right place, you're taking the right precautions, you're showing whoever's underneath of you, whether it's an apprentice or whether it's somebody just there helping you, that is an absolutely huge part of it.
And what would you tell your 18-year-old self with all the experience you have now, knowing everything that Johnny Cash knows today? What would you tell yourself a few years ago?
So, I've gotten asked this question quite a few times, and I don't know as if there's a whole lot I would have told him, because he, was a hard worker right out of high school. I went and did a whole bunch of stuff on my own. Other than, like, the biggest thing was play less video games, go hang out with other people. Like, that to me would be the biggest one. Not that I never did, but I definitely spent more time doing that stuff when I could have been spending time with other people. But that was really the biggest thing, I think. I was pretty willing to take risks and figure out my way through them at that point in my life. And I had, goals and purpose. I knew kind of what I wanted to do. I knew what kind of life I wanted to lead. So I was able to find my way to it. And yeah, so that'd be my biggest thing.
But doesn't surprise that you were willing to take risks. That's why you became a lineman after all, I guess.
Yeah, so maybe I should tell you the whole story. When I was a teenager, I had worked for a forester, and which is like land management, planting trees, doing timber sales. And I really love that kind of work. Towards the end, I worked for him from when I was 12 until I was 18 or 19. And I got to like run some projects by myself, but my issue was that it did not pay very well. And I knew I wanted to have a family, so either I would have to work for 10 years and not get paid very well to get my forestry license, or go to 4 years of college. And I really did not like the idea of going to college. So when I was dating my girlfriend, both her dad and her uncle were a lineman. So I got to go job shadow when I was 16 at the company I'm working at now, to see kind of what that job was about. And I knew that they made really good money. And I knew that it was outside. So those were kind of my two big requirements for a job. I wanted to work outside, and I wanted to make a decent amount of money. So I went and tried it for like 3 or 4 weeks over summer, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know as if I hugely knew what I was completely getting into when I started. I don't think until I was like in climbing school that I realized I really had to get over my fear of heights. But yeah, so that was kind of how I decided to become a lineman. And I it, it's hard to get into if you don't know someone that is already a lineman. I think it's not really a common job to stumble upon. So that was kind of how I had my goals laid out when I was 18. Was I kind of knew this direction. I knew I wanted to make decent money. I knew I wanted to work outside. So for me, it was the best decision to go to a school and then find a line job somewhere.
Yeah, Johnny, I'm asking everyone lately about imposter syndrome and about this feeling of not knowing if you're good enough for a certain job. And you mentioned that you had a hard time overcoming your fear of heights. How did you overcome the fear of heights? Was it by mere exposure fury, or did you do something different apart from just climbing a lot of poles until you stopped fearing them?
Yeah. So when I was down at climbing school, I really struggled with the climbing part. And it was because I was afraid of heights. So I just remember, like, when I was climbing, my mouth would always be dry. Like, I could hardly talk. My mouth was so dry because I was afraid. And we got towards, so there's certain tests that you have to pass, physical tests that allow you to continue in the school. And you have to, like, hang a cross arm or hang a double set of cross arm in a certain amount of time. And we were getting to that point, and I had been feeling more comfortable, but I still didn't step out of, like, into the entire trust that I needed to do to trust myself and my equipment. So I know I had, like, completely failed the test while we were practicing, because you practice them for a couple days and then you take the actual test. And so we're coming up to that point, and to put it in perspective, like, I knew this was all on me, right? I had gotten the loan out. The loan for the school was all for me. I had to fund it all myself. So, like, if I failed, it was all my responsibility, and I would have to completely figure out what else I wanted to do in life. So I really didn't want to fail. I think that fear of failing was almost, and has been, a bigger struggle for me than even the fear of heights, right? So I don't think I really used my fear of failing to overcome my fear of heights, but in that moment, like, when I finally went and did the test, I went from not being able to complete it in time to doing it. I was like 5th or 6th fastest. Maybe it was like more like 8th. I can't remember. Out of the 15 guys that were in my circle. And that was a day that I will, like, never forget, because I had failed it. And then test day comes and I completed it. And I was so proud coming down that pole after I knew that I finished it. And I get down and I look at my instructor, and he says, I'm here expecting, like, to be congratulated, because I completed it. And he's like, yeah, you passed, but why couldn't you do that when you were practicing? And I just was, like, floored. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I just completed it. And he's like, you were willing to not, you were only willing to do your best when it counted. And I was just so floored. You have these moments where you're like, wow, like, I'd never ever even thought of it like that. And after that, I realized, like, my mind is what is keeping me from doing the things that I want to do and the way that I know I should be performing. So after that, I was way more comfortable, I realized, okay, well, this is what the issue is. And I ended up doing really well the rest of climbing school. It was a little bit different because we had gone to like actual building. Like instead of just climbing poles up and down all day, we were building things. But I think after that, I really realized like, okay, so what was really the issue? And the issue was I didn't believe in myself. And that's what I didn't believe that I could do what I was doing. And that's why I struggled so much. So for me, getting over that fear of heights was, okay, well, everybody else around me can do this just fine. What do you not believe that is keeping you from doing this thing that you want to do? You know, comparison's a very dangerous thing sometimes, but if you can look at somebody else and say, okay, well, what is different about them that allows them to do this thing? And say, okay, well, maybe you just need to trust some more. Maybe you just need to do this thing some more. And that's what allowed me to get over my fear of heights. So absolutely, I wouldn't have been able to do it on my own. My instructor was a huge, huge part of that, helping me realize what was actually behind that and why I couldn't overcome it until, he really helped me realize where the issue was. And it was the 6 inches in between my head.
So all this time you couldn't do it because you didn't believe in yourself, and that's why you had this fear. But in the end, when push came to shove, when it was clutch time, when you had to perform because it was either you did it or you were out pretty much because you had the loan and you had all of these ideas in your mind, and you get that adrenaline rush that a few years down the line you would get used to, but at the time you weren't used to that adrenaline, and you performed. So in the end, you had it in you all the time, and you showed him.
Yeah, I think that's the funny thing about fear is a lot of times it's just our mind telling us like we can't do something, and then we just have to show it that, okay, yes, you can. It's not as big of a deal as you're making it out to be. So that's a huge thing that drives me even today, so.
How do you deal with this today? Knowing everything that you know, because there are people who journal, there are people who talk to other people about the issues in their mind. How do you deal with this?
I don't do a lot of journaling. Sometimes I'll sit down and journal, but I have my wife I talk to all the time, and then I have some really good friends of mine that I talk to when I'm having issues. Like my wife's uncle works for the same company, so we worked together for quite a few years as linemen, and we're really, really close friends. So I go to him a lot if I'm struggling with something, or yeah. So but yeah, I think having a support group of 1 or 2 people is just the most important thing that you can do.
They say that's why you live longer if you have a group of friends, even in an older age, because you have this emotional release when you have problems. So yeah, having a support group can help a lot for sure. And JC, what is your definition of success?
Being able to provide a good life for my family. I think that's my biggest definition of success. And I think it's changed a little bit even in the last 6 months, especially since I've taken this new job. It's like, man, I really just want to spend time with my family. Yeah, it's different when you don't have kids, and it's different when, I think my definition of success, if you asked me 5 years ago, was, or even 4 years ago, like I have my dream job, I have a beautiful wife, like I was successful and I am successful, but I think we can be successful as long as we're content with where we are and where we're going, and we know that we are doing the best that we can for our family. Like, to me, that's success right there.
Yeah, family comes first. Definitely. What do you think of things going forward? You've talked to me about copywriting, about potentially ghostwriting. What are your plans for the future, your future projects?
Yeah, so I'm working on a lot of newsletter stuff right now and kind of pursuing that. But like it all kind of wraps up together, right? If you're going to offer something that's a reasonable service to someone, you probably should know how to copyright. You probably should know how somebody else thinks and how you can provide value to them. I guess that's what I'm figuring out now is what can I learn that people are interested in, that there's a demand for, and that I can do very well. And so I think my being on X and learning even just about these subjects, I can't say that I use them all the time when I'm tweeting or whatever. But like when you're trying to figure out what you can build, and I think I want to build a business. It's not that I don't enjoy my job, but I also want to build something of my own and use different talents or skills that I've learned to help other people with their issues. So for me, that's my kind of way forward from here. And obviously, I haven't been doing this for very long, but I think this summer I kind of had like an identity crisis and I had no idea. I don't even hardly remember the summer at all. I was just kind of in a fog and I was working, but I had the feeling of like I had all the boxes checked, you know. I was very happy with where I was, but I didn't know where I was going. And I think looking forward, I've always been familiar with the digital world and doing things online. And I would love to be able to spend even more time at home with my family. I think it's easy to just accept where we are right now and not look for those other opportunities. Like I could have been perfectly content doing what I've been doing, and I could have made that mental block like, okay, this is just what I'm doing for, until I retire. But I think we get exposed to ideas and we don't necessarily realize how infectious they are until they've completely taken hold. And that idea of, which I was never like obsessed with, like the travel lifestyle or going to lots of places. I've never flown. I've never been out of the United States. But I've always wanted to, but I just never saw myself as that kind of having that ability. So
It's not for me kind of thing.
well, yeah, I just thought that it was completely out of reach for me. Like I didn't have the time. I wanted to do other things. But now I'm kind of realizing like, yeah, it would be nice to take a trip to some other country and, show my kids some other thing that I've never been able to experience in my life and meet new people. And so, yeah, I guess that's kind of the direction now. If I had to say, was just discovering what my value is for other people and how I can help them with their issues. So,
Maybe if we think of it as a video game, you sort of finish the stage and now you have to go to another stage. You checked all the boxes, all of the American dream boxes, the wife, the kids, the good paying job, and now you were figuring out now what? Because I have everything that people say I should strive for, and now what? And I guess that's when you had this little crisis and started rethinking stuff and getting exposed to new ideas on X and new people, and suddenly you see that maybe there's a whole world around that I could experience, I could show my kids, I could do different things. I think life is pretty much like a video game in many aspects, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm learning that more and more, for sure. It's weird to think in that way, I guess, if maybe you're older, but obviously I have lots of experience playing video games, so it does make sense when you put things in that frame of, okay, well, if I do this, there's this outcome, and if I work on this long enough, it's going to reward me in this way, and if I help this person out, they're going to give me this. It's weird how much it's the same as life, and there's not that, like, when you read a book, like, you put yourself as the character, but there's not the same level of interaction there. So yeah, no, I think you're really right on that.
Yeah, I think especially for us because we pretty much grew up with video games already. So there are many references that we have from video games. And video games are a much more interactive experience, more immersive, because you really are the character. You're not just imagining in your mind. You really can move it and you can talk to people or do whatever the game is about. So it's no wonder that video games are like the type of media with the highest earnings right now, even more than cinema, more than music, because they're so addicting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. So I was wondering if you enjoy black licorice or not, because we never really got to go over that one.
Dude, I don't think I've ever tasted black licorice, to be
Oh my
honest. I'm
goodness.
not even sure what it is. I've heard of it, but I've never. Is it like a candy or?
It is a candy. Yeah. Generally. It so it's either, I think they have a bunch of different kinds, but black is my favorite, but it's like, I don't want to call it bitter, but there's a different taste to it. Like, if you try black licorice, you either love it, it's an acquired taste, or you will never eat it again kind of food. And you should probably, it's originally from Australia. Like, it's some plant in Australia that they actually extract it from. So maybe you could get some from our Australian friend. But yeah, you'll have to try some. I don't know if it's a common thing in Brazil or not, but you'll have to find some
Yeah, I don't
somewhere.
think we have it, but when I visit you, I'm sure to have some black licorice.
Yep, I got some at the house. So
You have some for the kids trick or treating?
we don't get anyone here trick or treating, but I don't think they would very appreciate me if I gave them black licorice. So they're like, we're never going back to that house again.
Yeah, you get a lot of tricks.
Uh huh.
Yeah, man, I gotta try it. Black licorice.
So I'm a coffee aficionado in a sense. Do you like? I know you enjoy coffee also. Are you a coffee snob? What kind of coffee do you drink? Do you drink it black?
Oh, I definitely like black. No sugar, no milk, nothing. But I wouldn't call myself much of a snob. Of course, I prefer the good stuff. It upsets the stomach less, but I'm not much of a snob. We get some supermarket brands and
Mm.
that's it. Like, of course, I like to go to some fancy coffee shops once in a while, but I'm not much of a snob with anything, really. Not much of a wine snob either.
Mm,
I got a friend who's this like wine taster, but I'm not a snob.
yeah. Like I'll pretty much drink any coffee, but I definitely prefer. So there's a friend of mine nearby. His wife's family is from Honduras, so they import coffee directly from them and then they roast it right here. So that coffee is off the charts. Just going and getting some like roasted a couple days ago coffee, grinding it up. It's pretty incredible. So that's what I normally drink, but I sometimes I drink it black. Most of the time I have like just milk or sugar. I normally put raw milk in it, but yeah. So, but yeah, I love coffee. I drink probably
Yeah, I
a
first
pot a
started with
day.
milk, but eventually I had to cut on the milk and just keep with the coffee. I actually started drinking when I was in college to study for tests. So my grandma gave me one of those little Italian coffee makers you put on the stove,
Mm,
and I have it to this day.
there you go.
It has more than 10 years. And yeah, that's when I started drinking coffee and becoming addicted to it after many years. And in the first company I worked for, the coffee was terrible, so I got used to drinking whatever was available. So today I'm not as snob because of that.
Yeah, I worked for my grandparents. They have a landscaping business and they landscape for these multi-million dollar houses on the Atlantic City Island in New Jersey. So I worked there for a summer and my uncle was like, "Okay, I didn't drink coffee growing up." So he was like, "This is the coffee that you need. It's Wawa hazelnut flavored coffee." And it was really awesome. So it totally got me hooked on coffee, and I've been a coffee addict ever since.
Yeah, you can't work overnight without coffee.
No,
And did you guys get some other stuff like energy drinks or just coffee itself?
I never really drank energy drinks. I I worked as a forklift driver overnight, a night shift for one summer, and I would occasionally get like a 5 hour energy or whatever. But I've never been one for energy drinks at all. I just drink coffee.
Best drink ever.
Yep,
The elixir of life.
it is. So I think the one last question I wanted to ask you, it was on the list, but who is your hero? I was pretty interested in hearing this from you.
Dude, I could go all cliche on you and say it's my dad, which probably would be true. But I guess it's kind of hard for me to pinpoint a hero. Like, I think you have to kind of idolize someone to say he's your hero. But I do have people that I look up to or that I think are examples in their fields. For instance, I really like Messi. I've always liked him since I was a little kid and he started at Barcelona. And I've seen his whole career and the way he not only, of course, he has a lot of talent, a lot of, you could say, God-given talent, but you can't make it for so many years just with talent. You have to put in the hard work as well because eventually your body starts giving up on you. And the man won the World Cup at 35, being the best player. And I actually went to Argentina for the final. So it was absolutely insane. Like they had 3 days of partying all the time, all the business closed because they're insane with football.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Messi was this influence for me growing up because I really like soccer and it's the thing I have with my dad and my uncle and my cousin. We go to our hometown club to watch them and I think because of all of this, he was a very big influence on me. But I also have other heroes in music and culture. But I think if I was to pick one, and one that wasn't my dad, I'd pick him.
Awesome.
What about you, man? Who's your hero? Since we're here.
Yeah, I think I would have to say my hero would be my grandfather, for sure. He passed away about 3 years ago, but he was a huge influence in my life. How to, just love your family, be a hard worker, be honest in all your business deals. And he just taught me so much about life and how, just how to be an authentic person that loves other people, and he was very good about having conversations. He could start a conversation with anyone and keep it going for forever, So that, uh, I grew up watching him do those things. And so for me, it would probably be my grandfather. Outside of that, I'm not sure. I I don't know. Yeah, it's hard for me to pick somebody other than that as a hero, and I don't know who I would have looked up in like someone in popular culture. I don't know if I ever looked up to anyone in that way. Maybe, probably like, this is gonna sound really cheesy, but like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, he was probably my hero for a while. Yeah, that's probably my best answer. Is my grandfather for sure. So,
You have any quote of wisdom from your grandpa that you would like to share?
he would always, like, we would ask him lots of theological questions, and he would always encourage us to, I think in his words was, know who you are and what you believe so that you can be confident in everything that you're doing. And like, not just a surface level, like you want to really understand what you believe, because you don't want to be taken by whatever idea seems the best at the time, I guess, is kind of it. So to me, that would be his words of wisdom, would be learn about yourself and what you believe very authentically so that you are able to be confident. Yeah, I would say would be his best quote.
Yeah. Your grandpa seems like a very wise man.
Yeah, he was pretty
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, my grandpa used to say something similar about believing in yourself. Well, I guess not similar, but he had a quote like, you have to believe in yourself because you have to be the first one to believe in yourself. Because if you don't, no one will.
Yep.
And it's kind of cliche, but rethinking after he passed and his rethinking his life, and it made a lot more sense considering the context of his life.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. That's awesome. So, this has been really awesome. So,
yeah, it was awesome having you, man. I really appreciate you coming and being one of my first. And I'm very happy to know that your real name is Johnny Cash.
yeah. Now you can know.
So, would you like to leave a final message for our huge audience of 7 people?
Just do it. Make your dreams come true. That's my motto in life. Shia LaBeouf.
Holy shit.
Shia LaBeouf is my spirit animal.
Transformers fans.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Dude, that was awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Had a blast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.